You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today we are looking back at the 2010-2011 season in the NBA. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it. Indeed. The 2010-11 season, of course, was the first year that LeBron James joined the Miami Heat.
LeBron James.
It was, of course, the season that the Dallas Mavericks won the title over the Heat in those finals, 4-2, after the Mavericks had knocked off the Thunder in the Western Conference Finals. The Lakers, the round before that, and the Blazers in the first round, whereas the Heat got over the Bulls 4-1 in those conference finals. Of course, this was the season that Derrick Rose won the MVP. So plenty of people will argue a lot of that was backlash against LeBron. Rose was obviously fantastic that season, and he won the MVP, so he deserves the MVP. But again, there is a little bit of a conjecture as to how the voting may have taken place in that season. Kevin Durant led the league in scoring. Kevin Love led the league in rebounds. Steve Nash still led the league in assists, while Chris Paul had the most steals, and Andrew Bogut had the most blocks per game at 2.6 as a member of the Milwaukee Bucks. Field goal percentage, Nene led there. Steph Curry led in free throw percentage, and Matt Bonner shot 46% from three to lead the NBA in three-point shooting. This was the draft that John Wall went at pick number 1 to the Washington Wizards. We had Derek Favors go at 3, Evan Turner at 2, Boogie Cousins went at pick 5, Greggy Munro went at 7.
As Greg runs in, we realise this could get dangerous.
The Chief, Al-Farouq Aminu, at 8.
Sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit.
Gordie Hayward went at 9, Paul George went at 10, and then there's a pretty rough patch here. Cole Aldridge, Xavier Henry, Ed Davis, Patrick Patterson, Larry Sanders, Luke Babbitt, Kevin Seraphin, Eric Bledsoe at 18, Avery Bradley at 19, James Anderson went at 20. I thought Anderson could become a good NBA player. Obviously, that was incorrect. Craig Brackens at 21, Elliot Williams at 22. When you go back to look at past drafts and you look at players picked in the teens and 20s, you just realize how many of them have no chance in the NBA. And it's always something to remember when you get into the draft and start looking at the draft, say, for 2020, and we go, I've got this guy at pick 20, it's fantastic. Maybe he can be the next Siakam, or he could be the next Craig Brackens. Like, these are definite possibilities, and so many guys in this area just don't really pan out at all. In fact, probably the best pick between 20 and 30 was Jordan Crawford, maybe Trevor Booker, you could say, maybe General Grievous Vasquez, Quincy Pondexter. Like, they're the best players in that 20 to 30 area of that draft. But in the second round, Hassan Whiteside went at 33 to the Sacramento Kings. We all know how his story went. Lance Stevenson at 40, Landry Fields at 39. Who else? No one else really of much note went in this second round, but there's still a few interesting players there. In terms of undrafted guys, this was the Jeremy Lin draft. It was also the Boban Marjanovic draft, and both of those guys would have moments. Ish Smith, Alexi Shved, Donald Sloan, and Lance Thomas all had some moments in the NBA as well. So that was the 2010 NBA draft. Let's have a look at this season now from a fantasy point of view by counting down the top 50 players. Actually, before we do that, let's have a look at where someone like Johnny Wall came, some of those notable rookies, where they came in the rankings. Demarcus Cousins, we'll talk about Wall soon. Demarcus Cousins was 120th in this season for fantasy. Gordon Hayward was 283rd. He played only 17 minutes a night. Paul George was 171st. He played only 20 minutes a night as well. And they're probably the biggest names. We'll talk about Wall in a second because he did crack into the top 50 for this season. Let's look at that top 50 now. At number 50 was, this is 8 cat per game value. At number 50, Andre Blatch of the Washington Wizards. This was a huge season from Blatch. I vividly remember this year for a fantasy point of view when Blatch was putting up big numbers. We know he was one of the most selfish players in the NBA, but a player who could put up good numbers on a bad team. Blatch put up 17 and 8 this season. He gave you 78 from the line, 1.5 steals, doesn't really block shots, but had steals at a pretty decent rate in this season. By far his best year. He did start to come on a little bit towards the end of the year before that, but after this season, it went pretty rough. He went down from 34 to 24 minutes, only played 26 games, and then was out of the league in 3 seasons. Blatch, one of those guys who would love nothing more than missing his own shot to get a rebound to push himself towards triple-double territory. That's the sort of bloke that he was. At number 49, Andre Iguodala. He was an absolute fantasy beast during his time in Philadelphia. Not his best season. He was the 18th ranked player in 06-07, but he had a stretch of 7 consecutive top 60 seasons and 9 consecutive top 70 seasons, including that first one in Denver. Iguodala averaged 14 points, but it was 6 rebounds, 6 assists, and 1.5 steals where he really got it going fantasy-wise. Only shot 69% from the line. Giggity. And that probably held him back from being a better player. In fact, his best season, which was 06-07, he was an 82% free throw guy, along with 6 rebounds, 6 assists, and 18 points. So a guy that could really fill up multiple categories, and he was an absolute fantasy animal in that early part of his career. At number 49, Tony Parker of the San Antonio Spurs, age 28, averaged 18 and 6.5. He shot 52%, which, as we know, for a point guard is a really high number. But Parker was never a guy to really put up big steal numbers. He didn't block really any shots at all. In fact, his highest steal season it wasn't quite this one, but it was one in 04-05. It was 1.2. He was at 1.1 this season. Only 17 points per game and not a hugely high assist player. His best fantasy season was the 12-13 season where he finished 21st, averaging 20 points per game. So probably a better on-court player than he was as a fantasy guy, but that elite field goal percentage was a real standout for a guy playing as a point guard. In his first season in Miami, Chris Bosh came in at number 47. We had all concerns prior to this season. How would LeBron and Wade and Bosh all fit together? How would the sacrifices go? Because Bosh, remember, coming into this season was the 16th ranked player and had 3 consecutive top 20 finishes and then fell all the way to 47 playing, the Kevin Love role. He scored 6 fewer points, down from 24 to 18.7. He lost rebounds, almost 3 per game. His assists dropped by half an assist per game. His block numbers dropped as well. And weirdly, I've talked about this before, is we often assume a player going to a team with better teammates onto a better team, their efficiency will improve. They'll just get easier shots. And I think we've seen it this year. Kemba Walker, Mike Conley. There are going to be other options, but examples. But another one here is Chris Bosh. Went from Toronto to Miami, and his field goal percentage dropped from 52 to 50%. His 3-point percentage dropped from 34 to 24%. Like, easier shots with LeBron and Wade, no doubt, and didn't go in. So I think we definitely overestimate that impact of better teammates. Efficiency is going to go up. That'll offset his usage, and almost universally, it doesn't. So when we have free agency, when we ever get life back to normal here, as I record on the 128th day of March, it's actually April, but hey, hopefully the joke got through. When all this stuff comes back, we have to remember when players change teams that this supposed bump in usage, it doesn't always eventuate. In most cases, it doesn't, bump in efficiency doesn't always eventuate. And I think Bosh is a pretty good example of that here. At 46, Tony Parker's teammate, Timmy Duncan, he was 34 years of age at this point, only 28 minutes a night, but averaged 13 and 9, almost 2 blocks, 50 and 72, like really strong numbers from Duncan, of course, who had multiple top 10 finishes. In fact, even after this season, in 12-13, he was the 7th ranked player, a real big jump up there as he blocked 2.6 shots. That sort of came out of nowhere for Duncan in that 12-13 season, considering the trajectory of his shot blocking ability. At number 45, playing for the Houston Rockets, Kyle Lowry, played 34 minutes a night. Here he went from a 24-minute a night back up behind Aaron Brooks to 34 minutes here. 13, 4, and 7, 1.4 steals, 43 and 77% shooting. Big numbers from Lowry, and this would be the beginning of, and a run that's still continuing, of him being that top 60 guy for the next 10 seasons. In fact, he had multiple top 20 finishes. He had a top 10 finish in 15-16. This was the beginning, his first real crack at being a starter, and then he was able to really increase his scoring as time went on as well. Never really got that field goal percentage up, apart from 16-17, where he was at 47% from the field. At number 44, it is another point guard. It is Jason Kidd. 37 years of age Kidd was on this Mavericks team. Only 8 points, but 8 rebounds as well, 1.7 steals. And for a guy that couldn't shoot, he hit 1.7 triples at 34%. Again, I shit on Kidd a lot as a coach for obvious reasons, but as a player, his abilities were unbelievable, and he was able to really take those steps forward and become that good three-point shooter. Now, what happened here, though, is the 2 previous seasons, Kidd was the number 10 ranked fantasy player. So if you assumed that from him, which was always tough to do considering he was going into his age 37 season, but if you took him in the second round, you would have been a little bit disappointed. The team he was on was the same. He still played for Dallas, but we saw a 3-minute drop, 2-point per game drop. He lost 0.6 threes per game, lost an assist per game. The field goal percentage went from 42 down to 36 as well. That was the real beginning of a significant drop-off in his field goal percentage. A little bit disappointing if you did draft him as high as where he'd been the previous season. At number 43, a guy on the come-up in his career was Jrue Holiday, age 20. Only Holiday was in this season, and I should have gone through. I don't know why I didn't do it. I should have gone through and talked about who the award winners were in the All-Star team and all NBA first teams. Actually, let's do that now. Back to Jrue Holiday in a second. MVP Derrick Rose, Defensive Player of the Year Dwight Howard, Rookie of the Year Blake Griffin, Sixth Man of the Year Lamar Odom, and Kevin Love was Most Improved Player. Your All-NBA first team: Durant, James, Howard, Bryant, Rose. All-NBA second team: Pau Gasol, Dirk Nowitzki, Stoudemire, Dwayne Wade, and Westbrook. And the third team was Aldridge, Zach Randolph, Al Horford, Manu Ginobili, and Chris Paul. Look at the all-rookie first team: Landry Fields, Blake Griffin, Demarcus Cousins, Gary Neal, and John Wall. And on the second team, Paul George, Derek Favors, Greg Monroe, Wesley Johnson, and Eric Bledsoe. I reckon I'd take that, maybe I'd take that second team over the first team. But it is hard to say because there is 3 really good players on both of those. As for the All-Star game, Eastern Conference was Rose, Wade, James, Stoudemire, Howard, with Ray Allen, Bosh, Garnett, Horford, Joe Johnson, that is, Paul Pierce, and Rajon Rondo on the bench. There was 4 Celtics on the bench of this All-Star team and 2 Hawks, with just Bosh getting in for the Miami Heat. For the West, it was Chris Paul, Kobe Bryant, Kevin Durant, Carmelo Anthony, and Yao Ming, who was injured. Then Tim Duncan, Pau Gasol, Manu, Blake Griffin, Kevin Love replacing Yao Ming, Dirk, Westbrook, and Darren Williams. So back to Jrue Holiday. This is age 20 season for Jrue Holiday. It was his second year in the NBA, the first season where he was the starter for Philadelphia. I believe he took over from Lou Williams as the starting point guard. He would become an all-star the next year, and he would never fall back outside the top 100 again. He was 43rd here. A little bit of a downturn the year after, down to 76th, but then 27th, 33rd, 27th, 48th, 39th, 19th, and 17th, continually getting better and better. Is Holiday. He's a guy that would get you those steals, nice assists, solid rebounding. Only a 3 a game this season, but again, age 20, a really big breakout from Jrue Holiday to step up into that starting point guard role for the Philadelphia 76ers. Of course, he'd be traded in a couple of seasons as the beginning of the process. At number 42, it was Nene, center at that time of the Denver Nuggets. He was only 28. He played 31 minutes a night, and thinking Nene could play 31 minutes a night now is pretty laughable. 14.5 and 7.5 rebounds with a block and a steal, but it was really that high field goal percentage that pushed Nene as high as he got pushed. Let's move on to the next bunch of guys. Here we are looking at, of course, this is where John Wall comes into the discussion at number 41 in his rookie season. Wall played 69 games.
Giggity!
He averaged 16 points in 38 minutes with 8 assists and 1.8 steals. The shooting was rough. The three-point shooting was extra rough, only half a 3 a game. He was at 41% overall, but just enough there for Wall to show that ability as a rookie. And then, of course, we'd know that he would push well into that first-round discussion and have 4 finishes in a row, 12, 11, 11, 12 as a first-round fantasy player. in just his fourth season, as he was able to improve that shooting, start hitting more threes, and become one of the best shot blocking guards we've ever seen. At number 40, Joakim Noah, age 25 season for the Bulls. Only 12 points, but 10 boards, 1 steal and 1.5 blocks. We hadn't gotten to the stage of Noah becoming that really elite passer who could get you 5 or 6 assists per game. That hadn't come out just yet. That was more of a function of the myriad of injuries to Derrick Rose that he took on that role. So it was only 2.2 assists here. He would peak in that 12-13 season where he was the 13th ranked player, averaging 12 and 11 with 4 assists. And then he would actually bump his assists the following season to 5.4. But that was when his percentages started to drop way off. He was at 53% from the field in this one and 74% from the line. Of course, he would go down to his last couple of seasons of being a sub 50% free throw shooter. A pretty wild drop off when you consider it. At number 39, 35-year-old Ray Allen, 36 minutes for the Celtics, 16 points with 2 triples. It was really the threes that kept him in the rankings here, as well as a really high free throw percentage, but not much else happening there. Allen, who was a multi-time top 10 fantasy finish player, had fallen back to be that 4th round sort of guy, and did that for 4 or 5 seasons before really falling out of things as a member of the Miami Heat in the 12-13 season. At number 38, one of the best fantasy players of this early 2010 period, it was Gerald Wallace, who was a member of the Blazers this season. He'd been a member of the Hornets a couple of years before. 38th here. This is going from a couple of top 20 finishes with Charlotte. I had him in both of those seasons, I believe, as a fantasy player in my main leagues. And then he went to Portland and wasn't able to maintain the same level. Usage dropped off. Those really strong block numbers fell off. His efficiency fell off from the field. 3 percentage point drop there. Lost some rebounds and lost some scoring also. And then he had one more season from Portland to Brooklyn. Obviously part of that trade that netted Portland Damian Lillard. And then once he, after that one season in Brooklyn, he fell off completely. And that was the end of a really strong run where he had like 6 consecutive top 50 seasons. This was nearing the end of that though for Gerald Wallace, a really underrated fantasy player. At number 37, David Lee of the Golden State Warriors. We're still a couple of years removed from him losing his spot to Draymond Green, but he averaged here 16 and 10. He was always that double-double sort of a player. He didn't do a huge amount else, but really good free throw percentage, really good field goal percentage. He topped out the year before as the 8th ranked player, so again, if you look to him as a second-round guy, you were pretty disappointed. He lost 4 points per game and 2 rebounds per game from 9-10 going through to this 10-11 season, and lost 4 percentage points on his field goals and 3 percentage points on his free throws. So a really big dip from David Lee. He would go back to be a 20 and 10 player the following season. So a little bit of a down year for him in 10 and 11. Elton Brand at number 36, playing for the Philadelphia 76ers. Brand was age 31, averaged 15 and 8. He blocked over a shot a game. He had over a steal a game. Really good percentages as well. Brand, another one of those top 10 players. He had 3 top 10 finishes in the mid-2000s. And this was sort of a renaissance from him because the year before he was the 100th ranked player. The year before that, the 131st ranked player. So really stepped it up by improving the efficiency. He went from 2 years prior, a 45% shooter, up to a 51% guy, from a 68% free throw player to a 78% free throw player. And those big changes caused him to jump almost 100 spots in fantasy rankings. So a guy you could have looked at, I reckon, as a waiver wire guy, maybe a late round pick, who ended up giving you, 3rd round type of value. At number 35, a player who not in the NBA anymore. I don't think he's officially retired, but Zach Randolph, one of those guys again, the consistent 20 and 10 player who offered almost nothing else. Therefore, he was never able to be better than a top 30 fantasy guy. He was 35th here. It's his 2nd best season, and he averaged 20 and 12. He just did nothing else. 0.3 blocks, 0.8 steals. 50 and 76 is pretty strong from the field and from the line, but it's still not fantastic. And he was just that guy who did those things, and that was it. The year after this, it was pretty rough for Randolph. He only played 28 games in 26 minutes and was 173rd, and then was never able to get back anywhere near this level of form. So this was the end of Randolph's peak in this season. At number 34, David West, another power forward who was a really good fantasy player also. 19 and 7. He wasn't a great shot blocker either, but 81% from the line. That really set him apart. He was never able to be anything better than the 27th ranked player, which he was the year before that. Not a big shot blocker, not a good steals guy. Got to the line a bit and shot 80%, which is a rarity to get a big man to be a 50 and 80 sort of a player on decent volume, which is exactly what West was. But just really solid without that huge upside sort of a scenario. At number 33, Rajon Rondo of the Boston Celtics, age 24 season for Rondo. We're looking here before he tore his ACL, before he moved on to Dallas, and when things really started to go to shit for Rondo in terms of as a player. He was better the year before as the 20th best guy. He averaged here in 68 games, only 11 points, but 11 rebounds as well, 2.2 steals with 4 rebounds, shot 48 from the field, which is down from 51 the year before that, but of course a putrid 57% from the free throw line. He would still go on to have a better year in 12-13, where he was the 15th ranked player, where he was able to have a career high in scoring at almost 14 points per game to go with 11 assists. But he was a strong 3rd or 4th round player for many years in a row, basically until he got to Chicago, where he was barely able to crack into the top 100. And of course, we know this season he is nowhere near that top 100. On to the next list of guys at number 32, a name who fell out of the NBA really quickly, and that is Al Jefferson. Again, one of those players like Randolph, who was a big 20 and 10 guy. Well, he was actually 19 and 10 this season, but he did block 1.9 shots as well. His best season was the year after, in 08-09 for Minnesota. He was the 14th ranked player. The year after this, he would become the 16th ranked player for the Jazz. His best year back in Minnesota, he averaged 23 and 11 with 1.7 blocks. Okay free throw percentage, not a great guy there, but fell off pretty considerably once he hit Charlotte. He went from a 77, 76 guy down to 69, 65, 64%, which was a really weird drop off, and then back to being a high 70s, 80s guy in those last couple of backup years for the Indiana Pacers. But things fell off for him pretty quickly. After this, he probably had 3 or 4 more productive seasons after this one. And this was when he was only age 25. Things did come pretty quickly for Al Jefferson. Chauncey Billups at number 31. He was 34 years of age at this point. He was playing for the Knicks. He averaged 17 and 5 with a steal and 92% from the free throw line. Not his best season. That was, in fact, the year before as a member of the Nuggets in 9-10, where he averaged 19.6 points per game. Billups, of course, was part of the Carmelo Anthony deal. Big numbers again. Look, he wasn't the highest assist guy, but good scoring, hit a lot of threes, good massive free throw percentage on really high attempts, and that was his number 1 fantasy category. My mate at number 30, Fat Face Ray Felton, who was putting up big numbers this season, one of his best seasons at age 26. So Felton, part of that deal, the Melo deal as well, moving on from the Knicks to the Nuggets, and that really did impact his fantasy numbers this season. Felton was starting for the Knicks, playing 38 minutes a night, averaging 17 and 9. He went to the Nuggets, he came off the bench, he averaged 11 and 6. So that really torpedoed your fantasy season. He also decided he wasn't going to be able to shoot free throws for the rest of that year as well. He was putting up absolute monster numbers, and still, overall, his numbers, 30th ranked player is strong. But it was a real drop-off for fantasy playoffs time as he got traded as part of that Carmelo Anthony deal and really fell in a hole as he was a member of the Nuggets there. But some big numbers there, his best fantasy season. He went to Portland the year after that, where he wasn't as good, but still was serviceable. And then back to New York, where he had another solid-ish season. And then the end was coming for Ray Felton. At number 29, we talked about him on the One Hit Wonders podcast a couple of days ago, or last week, sorry. Darrell Wright. This was his one season in the Sun. 16 points, 2.4 triples, 29th ranked player. He would never get anywhere close to this ever again and would lose almost 10 minutes per game heading into the following season. At number 28, Paul Millsap, then playing for the Utah Jazz alongside Al Jefferson, as we mentioned. Millsap the following year would go on to be the 9th ranked player. He was 28th here, averaging 17 and 7 with 1.3 steals and a block on 53 and 76%. He was able to up his steals the year after to 1.8, which is a large reason why he was able to jump into that top 10 in fantasy ranking numbers. Millsap always had those strong seasons. He had four top 20 years, but of course has really started to age out now at age 34. As a member of the Denver Nuggets. At number 27, one of the best fantasy players of that late 2000s, early 2010s, Danny Granger comes in now. In 08-09, he was the 4th ranked player. In 9-10, he was the 6th ranked player. So by all means, and I'm pretty sure in our draft he went in the first round. I think we did an auction actually, so he was a pretty high spend guy. Only 27th this season, which is still okay, but not when you're banking on a first round player. He actually played more games than he did for either of those last 2 seasons, but 1.5 minutes fewer. He scored almost 4 or 5 points fewer per game, lower threes, steals dropped back off as well. Efficiency was fine, but he did lose 1 free throw attempt, which is a big deal when you're talking about a guy whose value is very much dependent on the free throw percentage category. Granger averaged 25 and 2.5 with 1.1 steals, down from 24, 5.5 and 3 with 1.5 steals the previous season. Remarkably, he shot the exact same free throw percentage for 2 years in a row. He would also be good again the following season, but then injuries would strike really in a big way, and he was never the same again. He went from have 5 seasons where he ranked 25th, 4th, 6th, 27th, 39th, to 440th, 244th, and 317th, and out of the league at age 31. The next one is Eric Gordon, who at this point was a member of the LA Clippers. Definitely his best fantasy season. He would go to the Pelicans, the Hornets/Pelicans the following year as part of the Chris Paul deal and play only 9 games there. He only played 56 games this season, but 38 minutes and 22 points. He averaged over 4 assists per game. He gave us an indication that he could be really good, and then the knee problems were an issue. He lost that ability to pass and score in that volume and stay healthy, and while he's had some solid seasons for the Rockets, he's never really been able to challenge that top 50 again, let alone the top 30. And he was, as I said, the 26th ranked player here. Al Horford, then for the Atlanta Hawks, and age 24, he is the 25th ranked player, averaging 15 and 9 with 3.5 assists. He hadn't begun shooting threes yet. He was excellent with the efficiency, 56 and 80% for Horford. We know that Al was able to be that second round guy for a couple of seasons. Of course, the year after this, he would go on and tear his pectoral muscle, and then 2 years after that, he would go on and tear his other pectoral muscle. But other than that, we had been relatively healthy, and he was relatively healthy after this. A pretty strong season from Horf, averaging that 15 and 9 to finish as the 25th ranked player this season. At number 24, the lead leader in assists was Steve Nash. 15, 3, and 11 with 0.6 steals. Of course, those assist numbers is what's really pushing him up. Here, the low steals are not ideal. The field goal percentage is okay. The free throws are excellent for Nash, of course. Not his best year. That was back in 06-07, where for the member of the Phoenix Suns, he was the 6th ranked player overall. But he was still able to put up a run there of, 9 consecutive top 20 seasons, and then just fell out here as the decline had begun. Fell out of the top 20 to be 24th here at age 36. 30th year after, 69th the year after that.
Giggity.
And then, of course, that last season with the Lakers, 217th, as the back problems really limited Steve Nash. At number 23, KG, Kevin Garnett, 34 years of age, 23rd ranked player, 15 and 9 with 1.4 steals, averaging 53 and 86 from the field and from the line. Of course, Kevin Garnett had 3 overall number 1 ranked finishes. He was a top 5 player for, let me count them up, 10 consecutive seasons. And so we sort of started to see the decline here as he joined Boston. He never had a top 10 finish. That's not true. His first season in Boston, he was the 10th ranked player, and then he was 24th, 46th, 23rd in this year, 25th and 50th, and then started to fall off, of course, once he joined the Brooklyn Nets, and the minutes went way down for Kevin Garnett, but still a force, but nowhere near the level of force he was at the beginning of his career. Fantasy darling Josh Smith, before he became one of the worst players in the NBA, was actually a massive fantasy stud. He was playing for the Hawks back then, 16 and 8, 1.3 steals, 1.6 blocks, 48 and 73. This is before he became one of the worst shooters in the NBA and became a 50% free throw guy, before he became absolute 3-point happy shot jacker who couldn't hit him and continued to try to do it. He was an unbelievable fantasy guy in that 2nd to 3rd round range for multiple seasons in a row, because he'd get your steals and blocks and rebounds and assists, and the free throws were okay, and the field goal percentage was okay. Of course, that would fall off and he would turn literally into one of the worst players in the NBA. Signed that big deal with Detroit and lasted not even 2 seasons there before he was traded to Houston. And yeah, things have just not been good at all for Josh Smith since then, despite the fact that he is still getting paid. So maybe things are still pretty okay. Next up, we have Kevin Martin, who was playing with Houston at this point. Of course, he had a run with Sacramento before this and then would go on to OKC and Minnesota. Unbelievable at drawing free throws. That's where his talent came in fantasy. 88% sort of a guy, or 89% this season on over 8 attempts per game. 23 points, 2.2 triples. It was like James Harden-esque in terms of having that impact from the free throw line. He did absolutely nothing else. No steals, no rebounds, no assists. But huge free throw percentage value, huge scoring, and huge three-pointers for Kevin Martin. Next up is Manu Ginobili. Off the bench, 30 minutes, but still unreal. 17, 4 and 5, 1.5 steals, 87% from the line. Getting that assist and steals combo, along with threes and points and free throw percentage. That's why Manu was able to be this good. It's not his best years. 07-08, he was the 13th ranked player back then, where he played 31 minutes a night. But this was the second time this 10-11 season when he played 30 minutes a game. He was 29 the year before this. And then after this season, it was when things really dropped off. And of course, that's when San Antonio went to the finals for another 2 years. But he went from 30 minutes a night to 23 minutes a night, and then 23 and 23 and 23, and then under 20 for the final 3 seasons of his career. So this was the last big minutes season in Manu Ginobili's career. Of course, it did help because it helped the Spurs win a championship coming up in the next couple of seasons. But a big drop-off in his overall production following this season. At number 19, then of the Portland Trailblazers, Lamarcus Aldridge, 40 minutes a night, 22 points, 9 rebounds, over a steal, 1.2 blocks, 50 and 79, just literally doing the same thing that he's pretty much always done. He had 5 consecutive top 22 finishes. Fell out a little bit in the first couple of years in San Antonio, but then 17, 18, 18, 19, back inside the top 30 as that scoring went back up to 20 plus points per game with the absence of Kawhi Leonard. Always been that good free throw, good field goal percentage guy, and no difference in this season. Not taking threes, and really not much different to what he's doing at all at the moment, where he is, of course, in his age 34 season now. Kobe Bryant, down to number 18 here, 25, 5 and 5, 1.2 steals, 45 and 83%, of course, really, really good. He would go on the year after this to be the 7th ranked player and then the 6th ranked player. So a little bit of an outlier this year, considering he'd been that top 10 guy for 7 consecutive seasons. And then you would have picked him in the top 10, no doubt. He finished 18th, and then he went back to the top 10 for the following 2 seasons. So why did he drop off in this season? What was different? Well, it wasn't his field goal percentage. That was fine. His free throw attempts were fine. It was the fact that his steals went from 1.6 to 1.2 that caused him to fall off here, and the scoring went down from 27 to 25. And that doesn't seem like much, but it is big considering the year after he went back to 28 points per game to push him back into that top 10 level. At number 17, Paul Pierce of the Boston Celtics, age 33 season for Pierce, 19 and 5, a steal, 50 and 86, really getting it done with percentages. An excellent roto player who was basically at least average in every single category. His worst Z score was rebounds at negative 0.08, so basically average. The only other negative category was blocks, negative 0.04. So obviously really, really strong stuff from Pierce. He was the 2nd ranked player back in 01-02 and had that strong third round run for about 10 or 12 years. Sort of finishing out along with KG once he went to Brooklyn, things dropped off for Paul Pierce. At number 16, it was Carmelo Anthony, traded from the Nuggets to the Knicks during the year, averaged 26 and 7 with 0.9 steals. He would go on after this to have the 8th ranked overall year in 13-14 and 10th ranked the year prior to that. They were his best 2 fantasy seasons. This was still pretty strong, of course, with really high scoring, great free throws on high volume, but he was able to, in his best season, where he played power forward, of course he refused to do that for so long, where he was able to improve his rebound numbers up to 8 per game and shot 40% from 3 in that season for the Knicks 13-14. After Carmelo Anthony, at number 15 is Dwight Howard. Of course, you're punting free throws. He's much better than this. His Z score for free throws in this season was negative 6.2. That is huge. He was at 59.6% on almost 12 attempts per game. Howard, this was his best ever overall fantasy season in terms of overall rank value, but because his free throws were so bad, it does skew things quite a bit. He averaged 23 points, a career high. He probably should have been in the discussion for MVP as well. 14 rebounds, 2.4 blocks, 59 from the field, of course, only 60 from the line. An absolute fantasy beast who was, despite finishing 15th, he was a first-round pick because you punt those free throws and then you're looking at a top 6, top 7 type of a guy very, very comfortably. I think people are going to be surprised at the name of the next guy at number 14. It's Rudy Gay. Gay was the 14th ranked player here for Memphis. 40 minutes and 20 points per game, a 3 per game, 6 rebounds, 1.7 steals. That's why he's that high. 1.1 blocks, 47 and 80% from the free throw line. This was Gay's best season. He did have another top 20 season in Sacramento in 14-15, but I was pretty stunned looking back on this season. I don't remember Rudy Gay being the 14th ranked player. In fact, the year before that, he was 43rd, playing exactly the same 40 minutes a game and scoring exactly the same 20 points per game. He just upped his steals, he upped his blocks, and he upped his efficiency, and that was enough to jump him 30 spots. And they're not crazy jumps. 1.5 steals to 1.7, 0.8 blocks to 1.1, 46.6 to 47.1 from the field, 75 to 80 from the line. They're not crazy numbers, but overall, that's enough to jump you those 30 points, which is 30 ranking spots, which is exactly what happened to Rudy Gay. At number 13, Finals MVP Dirk Nowitzki, averaging 23 points, only 0.9 threes per game. We think of Dirk as this long-range bomber, 0.9 threes per game. Only 7 boards. Why was he able to be this good? 7 boards, 0.5 steals, 0.6 blocks. Well, 52% from the field on 16 attempts, 89% from the line on 6 attempts per game. They are ridiculous numbers. Dirk was a top 10 guy for 9 of the previous 10 seasons up until this one, and then fell out to 13th. He would go back and have another 13th ranked season in 13-14, but this was sort of the beginning of the decline as he played 3 fewer minutes. He played 38 minutes the year before that, down to 34 here, and would never top 34 minutes again. Of course, it doesn't matter. They won a championship. So exactly like we talked about with Ginobili, is limiting the minutes of your star players. Maybe just that little bit can be helpful in securing that title. But still, Dirk was amazing this season and rightfully won that Finals MVP. It was also a weird year because he jumped his field goal percentage up massively. This was his best ever field goal percentage season at 52%, shooting 39% on his 3-pointers. At number 12, Pau Gasol of the Los Angeles Lakers, 19-10 with 1.6 blocks on 53 and 82. Get your big man who blocks shots and hits his free throws, and that's exactly what Pau is. He was a second-round guy for 4 seasons in a row. 08, 09, 9, 10, 10, 11, 11, 12. And in the year 12, 13, he only played 49 games and was 82nd in per game value as his free throws really took a hit, as they did at the end of his career as well. That was weird, going from 82% down to 70% in that 12-13 season from Gasol. Always an underrated passer. He was an average over 3 assists per game for many, many years in a row. Gasol was a real fantasy stud. At number 11, the man who got his coach fired / forced him to resign this season, Darren Williams of the Brooklyn Nets in this season. Of course, he would start the year as for the Jazz. Jerry Sloan retired, and then he would get himself traded over to Brooklyn. He had a really strong run from 08-09, where he was actually 07-08, 15th, 9th, 14th, 11th, 8th, 14th, and then injuries hit and minutes dropped and form dropped, and he was shit after that. It was a pretty abrupt fall from Williams, but this season he was great. 20-10, 4 rebounds, 1.6 triples, 1.2 steals, great free throw numbers, a really strong season, a strong second-round fantasy guy who did have some first-round finishes there, 3 of them, in fact, over the course of his career. At number 10 is Russell Westbrook, just age 22 season for Westbrook, back in the times when he could be relied upon to be an 84% shooter. This was, of course, when he was still sharing the court with James Harden and, well, not James Harden, actually, with Kevin Durant. Actually, was Harden there yet? No, Harden hadn't. I'm getting my years confused. No, Harden had arrived. He was only playing 27 minutes tonight. So Durant and Harden still there. Around this time for Westbrook. Of course, this wouldn't be his best season. That would be 16-17, where he was the 6th ranked overall player. But this would begin a multiple year run of being a top 10 player. It was 10th here, 6th the year after, 8th, 10th, 4th, 2nd, and 11th for all of those years in a row. And then, of course, has fallen out the last couple of seasons. He averaged 22, and how weird is it seeing Russell Westbrook averaging 4.6 rebounds? 4.6. He's the progression in his rebounding rate is astonishing, and you see it going up there to those triple-double seasons. He only averaged 8 assists here, but he did have 1.9 steals and shot 44 and 84 from the field and from the line. At number 9, Kevin Love, the most improved player this season. This was back, and who was the coach? I don't remember who the coach was that wouldn't play him. He'd play guys like, I'm getting the names, I think it was like Ryan Hollins over him. There was definitely someone that, I can't remember who it was, that they would play over him. The year before that, he only played 28 minutes a night. He averaged 14 and 11 and was the 66th ranked player. But they finally went balls out and said, screw it, let's play Kevin Love big minutes. And he was the 9th ranked player. The following year, he'd be the 4th ranked player. He went from 14 points to 20 points, 11 points to 15 boards. He started banging in threes. He started the assists. They didn't really jump up until 13, 14. Excellent from the free throw line. Attempts spiked there as well. But that 15 boards with 20 points was really the value that Kevin Love brought, as well as hitting threes and hitting free throws. He was a fantasy beast for many, many seasons. At number 8, Monte Ellis of the Golden State Warriors. This is really before Steph Curry started coming into his own. Ellis was driving things for this team. This was his last full season with Golden State. He would be traded the following year to the Milwaukee Bucks for Andrew Bogut. 40 minutes a night Ellis played in this season. Obviously really, really big numbers there. We'll talk about his teammate in a second. 40 minutes a night for Ellis, 24 points, 5.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists with 2.1 steals. One of the biggest things with Ellis was getting those steal numbers, 45 and 79. A first-round guy for a couple of seasons, and then after this, really started to drop off and become that third-round guy, 32nd the year after that, 25th, 36th, 49th, 58th, and then 175th and out of the league. A really abrupt ending to Monte Ellis's career. I teased his teammate, and that is Steph Curry, who was the 7th ranked overall player this season. We know Steph would go on to be even better than this. He only averaged 19 points here and only 2 threes per game, despite shooting 44%. 6 assists and 1.5 steals, sharing the ball with Monte Ellis a bit, but 48 and 93 are ridiculous percentage numbers from Steph. Stephen Curry's fantasy career, and it's going to be a little bit blemished this season, but it is absolutely ridiculous. His per game rankings, his rookie season per game, 7th. And then 7th, 10th, 4th, 2nd, 1st, 4th, 3rd, 5th. Never outside the top 10 in his career. Now, of course, this season's going to be different. He had the year in 11-12 where he played 26 games, and that hurt his overall total ranking. But per game, he was astonishing. And no different here, as he was 7th overall ranked player, and then he would get even better moving forward from the 12-13 season where he was 4th, 2nd, 1st, 4th, 3rd, 5th. What an absolute run from Steph Curry. Let's talk about the MVP now, who was the 6th ranked player this season, Derrick Rose, age 22, 25 points with 1.6 triples. Getting those sort of threes out of Derrick Rose is a big change from where he was the year before. The year before that, he played 37 minutes a night and hit .23. So he took it from 0.2 to 1.6. That is a huge jump. He pushed up to almost 8 assists per game. He got over a steal a game, which he'd never gotten before and never got again. His free throws went from 77 to 86, so just an astonishing jump here. Also took more free throws. His usage went up. Now his efficiency did drop overall, but a huge season from Rose. Easily his best fantasy season. In fact, we talk about Derrick Rose, right? So he was, his first 2 years, 85th as a starter, playing 37 minutes. 62nd, playing 37 minutes. 6th this season. 13th. The next year, and then 191st, 92nd, 130th, 87th, 353rd, and 104th, and he's going to fall somewhere in the top 100 this season as well. But really, only 2 good fantasy seasons. Yes, injuries were a concern, but even as a rookie where he played, and a second-year guy where he played 37 minutes, his fantasy numbers weren't good. Low threes, low assists, low steals, low free throw attempts, low free throw percentage. Jumped it up for 2 seasons, and then injuries wrecked it. We don't know how that trajectory would have continued after that. Let's look at the top 5 now. At number 5, it is Amari Stoudemire of the New York Knicks, signed as a free agent there. Averaged 25 and 8, didn't really hit threes, but blocked 2 shots a game, 50% and 79 from the field and from the line. Amari's best season was 07-08, where he was 4th overall, but this was pretty bloody close to that. He was a 20-10 or 20-9 guy for multiple seasons in a row, but this was it for Amari. After this, Melo joined. Things dropped off completely. He was 71st the year after, and then that was the last time he played 30 minutes a game. So he signed with the Knicks, had one excellent season. Melo joined, an okay year, and then that was it. That was just finished. And a really sad end where injuries ruined his the end of his career and brought it to an abrupt end. As I said earlier, we were worried about what would happen with LeBron James and Chris Bosh joining the Miami Heat. Where do we draft Dwayne Wade? What happens with LeBron? Well, Dwayne Wade was the 4th ranked overall player this season. The year before this, he was the 4th ranked overall player. So nothing happened in terms of where you drafted him. And he fell out of that top 5 in drafts pretty easily. Prior to this, he was 1st, 23rd, 2nd, and 4th. LeBron joined, and then he was 4th, 5th, and 11th. And then things started to drop off for Wade in the 13-14 season where he was 29th. But he was still basically the same guy. 26 points, 6 rebounds. Now, the assists dropped from 6.5 to 4.5. That is a common thing when LeBron joins. But he, I guess, bucked that trend because his efficiency jumped from 48 to 50%. That's an encouraging thing. Dropped his steal numbers overall. I'd say his year before this was actually better than 9-10 season, but still he finished as the 4th overall ranked player. Chris Paul was number 3 for the New Orleans Hornets. 36 minutes, 16, 4, and 10, 2.3 steals, great free throw percentage, solid enough field goal percentage, 46%. Only 0.9 threes as well is a pretty low number, considering he's routinely hitting over 2 per game now. But Paul, much like Curry, an astonishing run. 17th as a rookie, 23rd after that in the second year. Then 1st, 3rd, 5th, 4th, 6th, 5th, 10th, 13th, 19th, and he's going to be right up there again this season. So a consistent top 3 guy for 5 consecutive seasons, a top 5 player for 7 consecutive seasons, an absolute beast Chris Paul was for fantasy. At number 2, Kevin Durant of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Durant was 2nd the year before. He was a pretty popular number 1 overall pick in this draft because of the uncertainty with LeBron. He finished 2nd, so nothing wrong with that. 28, 7, 2.7 assists. His assists would really start to spike in the next couple of seasons. 1.1 steals, 46 and 88%, of course. Unbelievable free throws on unbelievable free throw volume. Although it did drop from the year before where he attempted 10 free throws per game and scored 30 points per game. He was putting up some really, really big numbers as the number 2 overall player. And of course, that means at number 1,
LeBron James.
LeBron was your number 1 player. Again, we had, where are we going to draft him? He's joining Dwayne Wade. Is he going to lose touches? So much uncertainty heading into this season about LeBron. He was the number 1 player in Cleveland the year before, and he was the number 1 player in Miami this season. He did score 3 fewer points per game. He did also get 1.5 per game drop in assists. So how was he able to maintain as the number 1 player? Well, he wasn't as dominant a number 1 player. His overall value went from 1.3 to 0.97, so a pretty big drop overall in per game value. So it's not that things didn't drop off. He was still just able to maintain the number 1 guy, but he saw a 1 percentage point jump in his field goal percentage from 50 to 51, which is solid enough for a guy that's shooting that volume that has an impact. He was able to maintain the scoring at an okay level, improve the rebounding solidly as well. But overall, it was just more. Look, he probably would have dropped out, but because it was one of the worst overall number 1 ranked seasons in fantasy. Then that's sort of why he was able to maintain that level, just because of the not that other players were bad, but there was, of course, this value was all determined by relative averages and standard scores and standard deviations and that sort of stuff. So it has an impact. So he wasn't that far above everyone else, and everyone was always pushed in a little bit closer. So LeBron does end up though as your number 1 overall player. That'll do it for me today, guys. I'll be back tomorrow with another Dynasty Watch podcast looking at the Cavs and the Pistons. Make sure you're subscribing. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on YouTube. And don't forget to tell your smart device to place today's episode of Hollinger and Duncan on the Locked On Podcast Network. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.